Thank you for tuning in to Starkey Multifamily Podcast. I have with me Glenn Gonzales. He is the author of Maintenance Man to Millionaire, and I think his story is pretty fascinating. So, Glenn, thanks for coming and joining us.
Reed, thanks for having me. Pretty excited to be on your show.
Yeah, so let's get started. So let's start with your story. So you started out as a maintenance man. Let's talk about how that started and how you grew to where you are today.
Sure, I'd love to tell you that story. You know, it's interesting. I never planned to write a book. It's funny how it came about. I had a couple of people that had heard my story, and they're like, "Man, that's an amazing story." And they're like, "You need to write a book." I'm like, "I'm not going to write a book." I started off as a maintenance man, and now I'm trying to work my way through property management and syndicate deals. I'm not an author. But it eventually, after hearing that from multiple people, kind of convinced me I probably ought to do it. So I did. It's called Maintenance Man to Millionaire, as you mentioned. And it's just that. I started off in this industry while I was going to college. I was working full-time, but also going to school full-time. And my wife at that time got a job as a leasing consultant. And she called me while I was at school, and I was later supposed to get off my shift and go work as a waiter at the Marriott at a restaurant. And she said, "They're really behind on work orders. Do you want to come and help do maintenance?" I'm like, "Sure, whatever." So I did. And I ended up stopping my waiter business or job and continued going to school and did maintenance on the side. Well, I got a little jealous, as I'm doing maintenance guy, I'm carrying buckets of paint out in the cold and I'm painting apartments and putting out salt on the sidewalk so people don't slip and fall. And I have to say it's kind of miserable. And I was jealous because the ladies in the office were talking on the phone. "Yeah, I'd like to lease you an apartment. Come on down. I'd like to meet you." And I'm like, "Dude, I'd rather have that job than this job." Mm-hmm. So the regional manager came and was visiting the property, and I stopped the regional manager. I said, "Hey, I want to be a manager someday." And she's like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "I'm Glenn, one of the maintenance guys." She's like, "Aren't you a part-time maintenance guy?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am." "Well, I'll think about that. You go back to being your maintenance man." I'm like, "Okay, fair enough." So I went about, did my business. I learned a lot doing maintenance. Well, sure enough, a short time later, I get a call, says, "Hey, you may not be interested in this, but we got this little 60-unit apartment complex, and we need kind of a part-time maintenance guy and a part-time manager, someone to lease the apartments." And before she could finish telling me about, the job description, I'm like, "I'll take it." So I got to move on site. I was manager in the day and maintenance guy. And I have some funny stories I have to share with you along those same lines. When you lease an apartment, you have the prospective tenant or the person sign a lease, but they also have to, back in the day, they had to actually fill out a form that was the condition of the apartment when they moved in, so they wouldn't be charged damages when they moved out, right? The move-in condition report. And they would go and fill that out, and one of the stove burners wouldn't work, or the toilet was running a little, or the disposal wouldn't work, and they would come back with all these things. And like, "I don't know who did the maintenance on this, but I got some items that need to get fixed." So I said, "I'll take care of it for you." So they would leave. I was hoping that they would just go back to work or wherever they would went, but I'd go change my clothes and I'd put on some jeans and grab my tools and I'd go back over there and knock on the door, hoping they were gone. I had my key, and they answered the door. They're like, "Who are you?" I'm like, "Well, I'm the maintenance guy." And they're like, "Wait, I thought you were the manager." I'm like, "Well, I kind of do both." And there for this moment, we kind of had this awkward moment of silence because we both kind of realized I wasn't a very good maintenance guy. They realized that, and I realized that, So there I am filling that out. But it gave me some great perspective, right? Because there's never going to be a successful manager unless you have a successful maintenance guy on any size project that you own. And I've often had apartments that I've owned where the maintenance man and the manager didn't get along with each other. They weren't on the same page. And there were always issues with tenants, issues with staff, issues with them, control, budgeting. I mean, it just spirals out of control. But when they're on the same page, and the maintenance man person, I should call maintenance person, and the manager are on the same page, holy cow, lots of synergy, right? They talk about budgeting. They talk about timeliness and when units will be available to move in. And so over time, I just really realized from personal experience and also as a supervisor and an owner, those two have to be on the same page, and I talk a little bit about that in the book too. And so anyway, I transitioned from maintenance man to now a property manager, and I had success and got that little 60 unit leased up and humming right along. And my boss recognized that, like, well, good job, Glenn. I have this other 300 unit property that's kind of struggling with occupancy. Can you go kind of give me your opinion? Just, not the boss, but just go over there as a peer to peer, talk to the manager. You're a manager. So I did, and come to find out that she had a leasing consultant there that just was so ineffective, couldn't connect with tenants, prospective tenants. People didn't like, she was just ornery, right? And in this business, you got to be somewhat of a people person. So I shared that feedback with the manager. And the manager's like, I'm not going to get rid of my leasing agent. She's my best friend. And I'm like, wow, well, your best friend's not a very good leasing agent. She's like, well, she's still my best friend. I said, well, if I were you, I would probably have her shopped and get some data. So the manager shopped and got the report. And sure enough, the secret shopping report on the leasing consultant came back kind of verifying that she was ineffective and didn't have the ability to connect and no follow-up, blah, blah, blah. So I circled back with the manager because I'm kind of her peer. I said, look, manager, if you don't make a change here, the corporate office is probably going to fire you and your leasing agent because your occupancy is below all the competitors. And that manager finally wisened up and made the right decision because she realized what I just said. If she doesn't make a change, she'll probably get fired too for not really managing the property. Because managers got to manage. Made the change, occupancy went up. My boss called and said, I don't know what you told them or what you did, but it seemed to have worked. How would you like to kind of take on some other responsibilities? I said, as a regional manager? Like, yeah, kind of as a starting regional manager. And I said, I'd love to, right? So now I'm still managing my little 60, but I'm also overseeing some other little properties, and those seem to have done well. And, but what contributed to all of that stuff was just the fact that I was a maintenance guy and I was fixing stuff, and I knew how long things took to fix or not fix. I knew when to contract out things if I didn't have the ability to fix. And then when I was a manager, I also looked at the budgeting and the cost and vacancy loss, and all of a sudden, it's all starting to come together, right? As the way it's supposed to, how all the different components of property management really lend to other roles. And you just do that same thing on a larger scale. Well, fast forward over time, I later stayed in property management, graduated college. I was supposed to be a hospital administrator, and I did an internship at a hospital, and I hated it. So I didn't do that. And if I'm rambling, Reed, you got to stop me.
No, I'm
just going to keep talking, right? Because it's kind of my life story. And so during that time, I had to make a decision because I was at a serious crossroads. And some of your listeners may have been at that same crossroads. It's like, I'm trained and educated in a specific industry. For me, it was hospital administration, but I don't really want to do that the rest of my life. So I made the conscious decision to make property management my career. And my boss at the time said, well, if you're going to make this your career, if you're going to continue to oversee multiple properties, you need to get a real estate license because, you're now practicing real estate for other owners that we do fee management for. They said, he also said you need to probably get your CPM, your Certified Property Manager designation from the Institute of Real Estate Management, which was just more schooling per se. But I took his advice and got both of those things. And I grew in my career. I got recruited and went out to Seattle, Washington as a regional manager and had a very large portfolio. I worked for Equity. It's a REIT, a real estate investment trust. They're nationwide. I think at the time I was with Equity, the company, publicly traded company, owned 220,000 apartments that they owned and managed. So if you could think about the education I was getting from this gigantic company that just specializes in property management, what a great opportunity. I shifted somewhere in my career and went away from property management over to the ownership side, where I was hired as an asset manager to oversee assets that this company owned and renovated and did a lot of value add. And then I had to go and hire a property management company to manage the properties for this ownership, right? So I just went from one side of the table to the other side of the table. I used to be the property manager. I would chase contracts and needed to provide services. To now I'm on the ownership side. I didn't own them. I was an employee at a W-2. I was an asset manager, but I really had to hone in on when we bought an apartment, when the company bought an apartment complex, it was my job to make sure the property management company kept it on track, that amongst other stuff. So that was a very, very valuable experience. So fast forward even some more time, then I had the opportunity to run and operate my own property management company, which it had both its pros and cons. When I was really good at it, the owner would then sell his apartment complex for a profit because I had just created so much value for the owner. That's great for him. You know what I got? You'll never guess what I got, Reed. I got a pat on the back and a thank you very much. And he got a big old check. And I'm like, this just doesn't seem fair. I'm doing all the work, right? So along the way, I found a little deal and I decided it was a 60-unit deal I was going to try and purchase. And I went to a mentor. Now, my mentor at that time was John Gibson. He's in the book. There's a whole story about just John Gibson. We were both donating our time to the apartment association because we sat on the board of directors for the Washington Multifamily Housing Association. And I said, hey, John, you're a smart guy. You own a bunch of apartments. Will you look at my numbers and see if this is a good deal? He looked and he said, it's probably an okay deal. I said, okay or good? He's like, it's probably okay. He's like, I've got a better deal for you. I said, well, what do you have? He's like, I got this little 44-unit apartment complex that's not doing very well. I've owned it for years and years and years. I haven't been there in years, and I don't really care about it. It's a pain in the butt. He builds and develops Class A stuff. He's got this really old thing. He's like, I'll sell it to you. I said, well, sounds too good to be true. Let me go look at it. So I went and looked at it. Sure enough, fully neglected. Units weren't made ready. The manager had a pipe and a lighter, and I'm like, I could fix all these problems because I've been in property management my whole life, right? So I said, John, what do you want to do? So we came up with a purchase price, and then he said, I'll carry a note, but you got to come up with $150,000. I said, I'll buy it. He's like, great. But guess what, Reed? I did not have $150,000, right? So I just committed, and I went to my boss, and I went to a vendor that provides services in the property management. I said, hey, you guys want to go in on a deal with me? They're like, yeah, tell me about it. I talked to my boss and the vendor, and they all thought this was a great deal. So the vendor said, hey, if you're in, I'm in. So we were going to split it, Reed, a third. So I said, okay, we have to come up with $150,000 between the three of us. You're going to put in 75 and you're going to put in 75. And they're like, well, that math doesn't work. That means you're putting in zero. Well, zero is what I had to bring to the deal. And I said, look, you guys are coming in on a good deal that I found and put together. So I'm now going to syndicate this with you two. I said, but you guys get paid first before I get paid anything. You guys get paid first. And they did that. They each put up $75,000. We bought it and sold it, Reed, a year and a half later for about $1 million more than we paid for it.
That's
so
fantastic.
If you can imagine the paycheck that we got on this little 44-unit deal that was really neglected, and the seller, John, carried a note back, so I didn't have to apply for a loan at that time. Those deals, you probably don't come across anymore, right? Because everybody's kind of doing what we're doing. But wow, what an opportunity that was. That was the biggest paycheck I'd ever seen in my life. And that whole story is also, in the book, because it kind of helped me get a taste and a flavor for making money through real estate as an owner. But I think, Reed, what contributed the most to that success story was the fact that I was a maintenance guy. I'd been a property manager, and I was able to recognize a good deal, and I could fix some of the problems. Fix them, meaning recognize what's broken between the manager and the apartments. And I knew what it would take on both sides, money to fix the units and getting rid of the property manager and kind of repositioning it. I knew how to do all that because I'd been in property management for most of my life and a maintenance guy. So that, is what kind of whet my appetite a little bit. I stayed in property management after that. I stayed working for a W-2 for years. And I came across another gentleman. His name happened to be Ed. And I told Ed, hey, look, if you ever want to retire, he was 70 years old. Like, if you ever want to retire, Ed, call me and I'll buy your company from you. He laughed. He's like, I'm never going to retire. This was the most active, healthy, sharpest 70-year-old I'd ever met in my life. I was younger, so he seemed old. Now that I'm old, he seems young, right? It's all perspective. So he did. He called me a decade later. Hey, Glenn, I'm 80, turn 81 soon. Health in as much as it was, I'd like to sell you my management company. Like, John, Ed, I said, Ed, I don't really need to buy your management company. It's been 10 years. I said, I've been in property management so long. I've been running my own property. I can start a management company in my sleep. He's like, oh, I said, but what I do want, Ed, are those 8 apartment complexes that you own up in Dallas, Fort Worth. He had 8 of them. He's like, well, how do you think that works? And we kind of talked about the terms and pricing and whatnot. And he's like, but I want to keep my management company in place. So I tell you what, Ed, I'll leave your management company in place if you sell me the management company after I buy all 8 of your apartments. I'll buy your management company. He's like, well, that sounds like a deal. So that's what we did. I wrote a check for his management. After we closed the 8, I wrote a check to him to buy his management company, which had 0 value. But people ask me, why would you do that? Why would you spend money on something that had no value? Look at what I got in return, right? I mean, I got 8 apartment complexes that made millions of dollars in profits versus paying, a very little amount, a lot of money, but not much for a management company. That ended up getting dissolved, rebranded, and then later sold. So that's a whole nother story all in itself. So anyway, so we bought 8 apartment complexes. Well, that leads to the next story. It's like, I had to come up with $22 million from investors to close those deals. Do you remember that story I told you earlier, Reed, about how much money I had on the 44 units?
Yeah,
I had $0, right? Now the thing is, I need to come up with, back then I had to come up with 150. Now I got to come up with 22. Do you think I had $22 million, or I didn't even know that many people that had that much money. So you just learn. You pick up the phone, you start talking to very sophisticated family offices, equity firms, crowdfunding, all of those types of things. We crowdfunded. Out of those 8 deals, I think we crowdfunded 6 of them with crowdfunding platforms. So all of a sudden, I was able to raise money and close deals. And we built that portfolio up to about 4,500 units. So there I went from a maintenance guy earlier in my career, the first 44 units, buying, selling, working, learning, to owning 4,500 units. And we had some other people that I knew and had relationships with. They asked me, would I manage their properties for them too? So then I did a couple thousand of fee management. So I had 6,500 units under one umbrella, 4,500 I owned, and 2,000 we fee managed, and had a nice little organization going. Yeah, until I decided to break up with a business partner. Oh. Then we decided to sell everything. Oddly, I don't know. I think it was divine intervention. But as that business partner, I decided to separate ways together, made the decision, well, maybe it's just easiest if we just sell everything we have. We could not have picked a better time to sell everything we had, Reed. We've been selling and started in early 2017, 2018, and most of 2019, sold so many apartments. But if you know much about the market and what things are trading for in the last year or 24 months, I mean, I've sold 3,000 units in that time or more, and could not have picked a better time. I mean, we almost sold at the top. Right. I mean, the last deal we sold was just, 4 months ago. And now with what's going on in the market and the economy, I mean, people are like, dude, you're like a magician. How did you do that? Yeah. That's quite a story. What I get out of kind of my main takeaway is your ability to spot opportunity. And I think it's a great lesson for anybody listening is
it's not that, I don't think that you had better opportunities than anybody. I think that you spotted them and you took advantage of them. And I think that's the key difference that separates you from someone who's stuck in the same job and wants to do something bigger. These opportunities didn't fall in your lap. Every story you've mentioned, you asked for it and you went and looked for it and you took the step to get it, which leads me to a question that I want to ask you. The $150,000 stretch is a big stretch for most people, but even when you talk about making that $22 million stretch, what gives you the confidence to say, I have no idea where I'm going to get this money, but I'll find a way, as opposed to saying, I don't have $22 million. I just can't do this deal.
Yeah.
So where's the difference in thinking, between what made you successfully do this, which was bigger than most people do in their whole lives?
That's a great question. And I'm gonna ask you a question. I'm gonna pause and see what your answer is in a nutshell, and then I'm gonna share with you some experiences. So here's my question, you Reed. Can you teach a person to be an entrepreneur, or are entrepreneurs just born that way?
I think to some extent you can. Well, you're probably right. It's probably born. I think that's the angle you're taking.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know if your listeners know the answer to that. But let me share with you a couple of experiences. Do you remember when I was telling you that I was a waiter for the Marriott when I was going to college? My boss came and they said, hey, we're going to go upgrade all the TVs in the hotel rooms. So we're going to pull the old ones out and we're going to put new, flat screens in. And we're going to sell all those old 21-inch TVs for $40 if anybody wants to buy them. $40 for a 21-inch TV. I'm like, I'll take 100 of them. My boss is like, what? I mean, it's a 300-room hotel. So I said, I'll take 100 of them. And my boss laughed like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. Well, Reed, I turned around, I sold those same $40 TVs for $80 each. And it drove my wife nuts because I had boxes and stacks of TVs. I mean, I looked like a pawn shop, and where did I get that idea? I have no idea. It just popped into my head, while I was in college, because I was probably a starving college student. My parents couldn't help me with money or tuition or books, so I had to find a way to scrape every dollar I got. Now, did somebody teach me to go invest that money? Because really what you're doing is you're investing and you're going to turn around and you're going to, sell them for a profit. You're going to buy low and sell high. I don't know. I don't know if I learned that in college. I don't know if I was just born that way. But to answer your original question, when you're out and about and you're in your day-to-day business, if there are opportunities out there, you need to ask yourself, am I willing to take a risk? I mean, because it all comes down to that. Mm-hmm. If you're not willing to take a risk, you're probably going to pass by opportunity after opportunity. John asked me, he's like, yes, I'll sell you this deal. You need to come up with $150,000. I didn't have it. But I knew that somehow I wanted that deal, and I figured I'd go find it somehow. Same thing with the one when Ed said, I'll sell you my 8 apartment complexes. And to do that, I did the math. I had to raise $22 million. I didn't have anywhere close to that. And I didn't even know people that had that much money. And at that time, crowdfunding was a new thing. It hadn't even been established yet. It was just entering the market. But Reed, you just put yourself out there, you find the opportunities and the deals. And then to some degree, if the numbers make sense, and I'm pausing because I've got a whole chapter on my book about, you got to understand the numbers. You got to understand an opportunity, because some people convince themselves this is a great deal. When you look at the numbers, it is nowhere close to a good deal. It's just in their head. It's a good deal. Mm-hmm. It sounds good, but it's not actually good. Anyway, so I'm tripping over my words here a little bit. So, finding the opportunities, if you're honest with yourself, I think is where I'm going with that. If you're honest with yourself and the numbers don't lie, then you just need to buck it up and take a little bit of a risk and go for it.
Yeah. And I personally, I look at it as, I would much rather, at the end of my days, lying in there, looking back on my life, assuming I have that moment of clarity, I would much rather say,
Mhm.
man, I really screwed up a lot of stuff, but I gave it everything I had,
Yeah.
than to say, well, you know what, I lived comfortably and, nothing really exciting to look back on. So I guess that's my motivation is, you know, I want to be able to look back and say, you know what, I did that. That was my life and I'm happy about it.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and I
You know,
think,
I'm much like you to some degree. In my book, I talk about my successes, but ironically, I also talk about a lot of my failures and all the deals that didn't go well, or where I had lost my personal money, and how I survived the crash of 2008 and 2009 when, people were getting laid off their jobs. And I had some rental houses that all got, either short sold or foreclosed on. And it was a tough time. I went from kind of doing okay to back to zero. And as a result of that, I now live my life completely different than I did, back then, because I know what debt will do. I stay out of debt. I live conservatively. I don't live in a mansion or a big house, and I don't have, um, I don't really take extravagant trips per se. I look at opportunities to go on trips, but I'm generally taking my wife or my kids, and we go do adventures and stuff. But I've lived a very somewhat conservative life compared to other people that may have the same or greater or even less net worth than I have.
it certainly is an absolutely incredible story. And, you know, some of the part I do like about your story is that, like you said, you do talk about the failures, because I think a lot of us are conditioned because a lot of the stories, people are trying to sell their stories and they're trying to sell stuff with it.
Yeah.
So to talk about the failures and the struggles doesn't sell courses,
Yeah.
because people want an easy thing. But as you can probably tell everybody, that it's not an easy journey. There's lots of difficult struggles, and I'll save them to read the book for some of those. But
Yeah.
the struggles are real, and nobody has made it to where you are at without some major setbacks. It's just not how the world works,
Right.
and that's why I love your story. I'm fascinated with you as a person, and I think this is an incredible thing that you got. So, for those listening, your book, "Maintenance Man to Millionaire,"
Yep.
it's available on Amazon, Kindle, all those things. I definitely suggest checking that out. It's definitely worth the money on getting it. Um, so, Glenn,
Thanks, Steve.
did we miss anything on your story? Anything about?
No, I think we covered the highlights. I will say in the book, the very first chapter talks about the value of you, because early in my life, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I did. I thought I wanted to be a hospital administrator. But, somewhere along the way, I learned some valuable lessons personally, but also from other people about if you could just be really good at what you do and it doesn't matter what industry you're in, an electrician, a mechanic, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever the case may be, a salesman. If you're good at what you do, perfect your craft, because if you're really good at what you do, you bring value. You have experiences. You have value that you can bring to other people, and that will just lead you to opportunities.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
you're really good and you're a super smart guy, if I had a web designer, I'm just plucking that from the air. Let's call him a mechanic. I had a mechanic that was like the best mechanic I ever came across, and he's like, "Hey, Glenn, dude, I have an opportunity to buy this shop, and I just don't have the money. I don't know anything about real estate, but it's at this location and we'd make a killing." If he was an expert at his craft, I would stop and listen to the perfectionist and say, "Tell me more."
Mm-hmm.
But if you're an average Joe, and you're not very good at it, and he's like, "Yeah, I got this opportunity to buy a shop and I think it might make money." I'm like, "Dude, you're not who I'm going to go in business with." So the whole first chapter talks about the value of you perfecting your craft, being good at whatever it is you do, and that will bring value. And I learned that in my life. And so really the book is full of life experiences that really have found ways to create wealth for people in any industry.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Tagging on that, my would have been whatever high school tech class. So I was a mechanic actually, and the teacher
So you were
there,
that guy I was just talking about.
yeah,
Were you a good mechanic or a bad mechanic, Reed?
yeah. I mean, I guess not that good because I don't do it anymore, um, but
That's right. I'm not a maintenance guy anymore.
yeah, I remember my teacher saying something that has stuck with me on everything that I've done, and it's just what you said. Is he said, look, every job that you do has your name on it. So when that car goes out and somebody else looks at your work, you don't want them to say, "Man, look at this." You know, you want them to say, "Man, this is amazing." And that stuck with me that it doesn't matter, like you said, if you're the janitor or the mechanic or the web designer, you know, or the property manager, your name is on everything that you do. And if you slough off on that, you know,
Yeah.
people are going to judge you forever on that. And I think
Yep.
that's how I feel on that. That's my addition to yours. You said it much more elegantly than I did, but
Yeah.
I think it's important that no matter what you do, that you do it good.
Yep.
And to add on that even further is if you weren't, you may have said you weren't a good maintenance man, but you were good enough to get to the next level.
Yeah.
So, and then once you were at that level, you were good and recognized, and that's how you got to the next level. And I don't think if you know, if you were truly a bad maintenance man, I don't believe that would have happened. So
Yeah.
to give you some more credit than you're giving
Yeah.
yourself.
You know, Reed, it's funny too. When I was a maintenance guy, one of the hardest things I had to do is pull out this 40-gallon hot water heater. You had to cut the pipes and then you had to sweat in a new one, but you bring out the old water heater and it's full of just soot, right? And hard water and all this other, they're heavy, right? But you have to use a dollar, you get it out and you put another one. That whole process takes about an hour of your time to install one of those things. I remember later in life, I was touring some properties and the maintenance guy was always hard to find, always disappearing. And so I finally asked him one time, I was with the manager and she had issues and with the maintenance guy. And I finally asked him, like, where have you been all day? He's like, I've been working on this one hot water heater all day. I'm like, well, what's going on with the hot water heater? He's like, well, you know, I've been working on it for about 4 hours and I had to do all this stuff. And I'm like, well, is it a 40-gallon hot water heater? He's like, yeah, it is. I'm like, is it a high one? He's like, yeah. I'm like, was it in a closet or is it up in the attic? He's like, it's just in the closet, same level. I'm like, and it took you 4 hours? He's like, yeah. I'm like, BS, dude. No way. You're lying. You're out somewhere. You're doing something else. So my experience is actually hands-on later led to also finding out how to sift through, you know, bad answers, because people that buy multifamily or rentals or investments, sometimes they're sitting behind the computer looking at reports and getting answers to their questions, not knowing whether they're even valid answers to their questions or if they make sense,
Mm-hmm.
or if what they're getting told is just something that you're being talked to just to get you off the phone, right? Because that does occur too. So
Yeah. Well, and I can say firsthand that those contractors that you call are very good at saying why a job was really hard to do.
yeah.
And it's hard to call them out because every job is different. But sometimes you're like, man, it just doesn't take that long. You're either just incompetent or, you know, and so hopefully the wrong people aren't listening to this hearing me say that. But I've certainly heard all my excuses, and you've heard them all. But
Well, that's what make these shows that you put on, Reed, so valuable. Your listeners are, they appreciate this stuff, and I have to thank you. I mean, it's nice that you host these. It's nice that you bring, you know, different people on your show. What you're contributing to society is effective. So keep doing what you're doing, buddy.
well, thank you. That means an absolute ton. So Glenn, how can people reach out to you if they want to get a hold of you?
So I'll even give you my email. It's Glenn with 2 N's at obsidiancapitalco.com. So obsidiancapitalco.com. Shoot me an email. If we're in the same town or come across each other, you know, I'll sign your book.
Yeah.
So book, if I buy one or whatever, or if I have some, I'll give them to them when we're in person. And I come across deals all the time. So, I mean, in this challenging market right now, we stumbled across a deal that's actual gold mine because the owner wants to bail out and dump the property, and we're going to buy it.
Nice.
So opportunities are knocking.
Yeah, I love it. Well, sounds good. Well, I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you later. Thank you.
Thanks, Reed.